time of the year, all kinds of stuff to do, and the weather's nice and everything else. Yeah. All right. All right, last verse we looked at was a long time ago. We're talking about fair trade, honest deals, and that was, it is good for nothing, cries the buyer, but when he who has gone his way, then he boasts. And we're talking about dishonest gain, right? The idea of dishonest gain by telling someone that what they're selling is not near as good as they think it is, therefore it's not really worth anything, right? And so we think about that, the dishonest gain. So that's where we ended. Verse 15, it says, there is gold and multitude of rubies, but the lips of knowledge are a precious jewel. And so here we're talking about the value of wisdom. What value in America do you think we put on wisdom? What's that? Very little, right? Our older generation, how respected is our older generation? In the U.S.? Yeah, not very much, right? Kind of ironic. I was thinking about this a couple hours ago. I noticed that someone had a pet in their backyard in chain link, and so they're out there in a real well kept place. It was down the way. And someone came out with gloves on, walking around the yard, picking up after the dog. And I thought about that, and how important it was that they keep their yards so nice that they would do that. And I think about how little care some people give older people, What are we willing to do to honor our older people? And so who has more wisdom than the rest? Is this verse specifically talking about older people? And we're talking about putting a value on wisdom, right?
I've said for a long time that I think the government puts more regulations on dog kennels and how they're supposed to be ran and kept than they do on children.
Yeah, some of those regulations. Do you think about that? How do we gain wisdom? Experience, okay. Time. Through investment, through study of the Bible, through prayer, those sorts of things. So investment, right? And so it's valuable because it takes a long time to develop our personal wisdom, doesn't it? Learning from mistakes. A proverb, not from the Bible, or so what someone said. One time they said, I don't remember where I heard it or who said it, so I apologize if you're the one that invented this phrase. But they say a fool learns from his own mistakes, but a wise man learns from the mistake of others, right? Wisdom, okay? And so wisdom is something that's a blessing and that we should have great respect for, someone with wisdom and the work that we put into gaining our own wisdom. Anyway, we look at this and putting this under section 1, wisdom, the basis of wisdom, the foundation of wisdom maybe. Any questions or comments? Verse 16. It says, take the garment of one who is surety for a stranger and hold it as a pledge when it is for a seductress. Okay? Oh, I had more notes on this. No, where are they at? I didn't get my pages all put in my book. I lost them. Okay. I got to go from memory now. Take a garment who is surety. I'm all tongue-tied. I need to slow down. I rushed to get here. Take a garment of one who is surety for a stranger and hold it as a pledge when is for a seductress. You got that in the ESV. I think that was my next note. Go ahead and read that. I know I've got it here. Okay. You think about that, the garment. We're talking about their outer garments, their covering garment, right? We would call it maybe a coat, coveralls today. Has anybody bought Carhartts lately? Are they valuable? Right. Not only that, but they keep you warm and protected from the elements and these sorts of things. I found my papers behind my Bible. There's a law for taking surety. And so go to Exodus 20. Exodus 20. Exodus 22. Exodus 22, I'm sorry. Exodus 22, verse 26. If you ever take your neighbor's garment as a pledge, you shall return it to him before the sun goes down. For that is his only covering. It is his garment for his skin. What will he sleep in? And it will be that when he cries to me, I will hear, for I am gracious. And so the principle that we're talking about is mercy, right? We take a garment for surety. This was their law. God says you need to have mercy. Think about what you've taken from that individual, and they need to be protected. Go to Deuteronomy 24. Deuteronomy 24, verse 10. Says, when you lend your brother anything, you shall not go into his house to get his pledge. You shall stand outside, and the man to whom you lend shall bring the pledge out to you. And if the man is poor, you shall not keep his pledge when? What does it say? Overnight. You shall in any case return the pledge to him again when the sun goes down, that he may sleep in his own garment and bless you, and it shall be righteousness to you before the Lord your God. As we go back and we look at this verse and what it's talking about, take the garment of one who is surety for who? A stranger.
Well, that would be like taking a payment, like taking for a payment.
Yeah, it's earnest.
The surety is bond, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the guarantee that you're going to receive what's coming back to you.
I understand the second part of it.
And hold it as a pledge when it is for a seductress.
Immoral, right?
What's that?
Immoral.
Yeah, immoral. And so go to Matthew 5 and verse 40. This is
Matthew 5 and what?
verse 40. Says, if anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. And so this was another garment, right? And so you look at both sides of this. One was the taking and one was the giving up, right? And so should we have to take surety from, you think of a brother, and that's who we're dealing with, right? The book of Proverbs. Should we have to take things as surety from brethren? No. But strangers, do they have the same character? No, not necessarily, right? And so when we think about this, we think about maybe section 14 to put this under business, how we conduct business. We conduct business differently with different people, right? Based upon their character, their reputation, those sorts of things. Verse 17 says, bread is gained by deceit, is sweet to a man, but afterward his mouth will be filled with gravel. And so this goes back to the verse we just looked at. And so we have two verses that talk about dishonest gain. We looked at verse 14, dishonest gain. And we look at 17, talking about dishonest gain. Where's the reward in it? Where's the reward in dishonest gain? There's none, right? And so we see that. And so we think about section 27 for your notes, fulfilled life, right? How are we going to have a fulfilled life? By just being good people, doing what we ought to do. Verse 18, it says, plans are established by counsel, but wise counsel wage war. And so in Luke 14, and there's a song we also sing while you're turning to Luke 14. Think about the song, have you counted, what is it? Have you counted the what? You know the song? What's that? That's count your many blessings, name them one by one. Have you counted the cost? Right? I don't know if we sing that song very often here, do we?
I would say that was my answer.
That's all right. All right. In Luke 14, verse 28, beginning, it says, "For which of you intending to build a tower does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it, lest after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, This man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king going to make war against another king does not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is still a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks conditions of peace. So likewise, whoever of you does not forsake all that he has cannot be my disciple." So we go back. Plans are established by what? What type of counsel? Wise counsel. Okay? And in Luke 14, what Jesus is talking about here is have you counted the cost of following him? Right? And if we go back and we think about when we were converted, hopefully we could say, yes, I think I did. But later on, I think a lot of us have an awakening of sorts, right? We sometimes say, this is maybe more difficult than I thought it would be. You think about the apostles, right? They told Jesus, we'll follow you wherever you go. That was a statement made. In reality, did they always do that? No. We should have the same attitude they did, that we're going to always do what's right. So you go and you look at the second half. By wise counsel do what? Wage war, right? And so before you start something, take a step back and do what? Consider. Just think about it. And have you counted the cost, right? We think about some of the decisions the men make here in our business meetings, right? Sometimes they're difficult decisions. Do we make them off? Sometimes it takes months and months of consideration, doesn't it? Why? We've got to make sure that's the right decision to go through with it. All right. Any questions or comments? Verse 19 says, "He who goes about as a talebearer reveals secrets, therefore do not associate with one who flatters with his lips." And so these are types of people that we should do what with? Avoid. Maybe not do what with, but what should we do? Avoid them, okay? And so a talebearer reveals what? Secrets, right? What's that? Scandals. Are secrets a good thing or a bad thing? Depends, right? You go back to the verse, thinking about the wise counsel to wage war. Is that something you want someone sharing with the world, the plans? Last week in the gospel meeting, Eric's better at these sometimes, but I've heard the account a lot of times about the guy that came down he dropped his helmet and came down the side of the mountain outside the gates. Sardis. Yeah, you think about that. What did he do? He's not necessarily a talebearer, but what did he reveal? Yeah, the secret. The secret. Okay, so sometimes secrets you just, it's important. Jesus told his disciples, there's many other things I'd like to tell you, but what? You're not able to bear them at this time. It's not necessarily a secret, but it wasn't the right time to reveal it. When was the book of Revelation written? What's the word mean? To reveal? When was it written? When it was time to reveal it. Okay.
But a talebearer is a gossiper.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Going around telling everybody's business.
Somebody that just accidentally,
No. Yeah. So don't associate with one who yeah. And it says flatters with his lips. Boy, that sounds good. If they'll tell bear about others, who will they also tell bear about? Yeah, there you go. So you think about that. And so maybe the tongue over here, section 11, we should put this verse under. Verse 20, "Whoever curses his father or his mother, his lamp will be put out in deep darkness." Another verse talking about what? Parents and children, relationship. So you think about that, section 21, put that there. And so no respect for who? For their parents. Okay, verse 21, "An inheritance gained hastily at the beginning will not be blessed at the end." And so sometimes we say what? Say if you can't get it, you probably won't be able to keep it. I've also heard, these are rules of thumbs or things that we come up in the secular world. One generation makes it, another one gets it, and the next one loses it, right? You've heard things like that. So an inheritance gained hastily at the beginning will not be what? It won't be a blessing in the end, okay? So we think about that, maybe section 17, generosity and greed. It won't be the blessing that we think it is. Job, did he regain what he had overnight? I don't believe he did. There's no indication that he did. All right, verse 22, he said, do not say, I will recompense evil. Wait for the Lord, and he will save you. I know at Bible camp, when I was young, people joke around. They say, vengeance is mine, thus saith the Lord. I'm just doing the Lord's handiwork, right? You heard that before? Is vengeance our problem? Is it our responsibility? No, it's not. Let's look at Romans 12, verse 19. If someone gets there, they're welcome to read. 12:19.
Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord.
Okay, so this is a real similar verse to what we just read. This is the verse that we're probably more familiar with, isn't it? When we read this verse. And so, whose responsibility is it? Yeah. Does God repay? You think about, again, there's so many things that refer back in my mind that I've been thinking about our meeting, right? God's plan, we looked at history, historical facts regarding the prophecies of God. Was God's vengeance at work? Had to be, right? And so the fifth nation that Brother Cates talked about, where the nation, they camped outside of Rome for, was it 10 years or 15 years? Just sat there. You know, the question is, why did he do that? Nobody can answer, with definity why, right? He didn't record it. But, some people say because he knew that was God's responsibility. He didn't need to take care of Rome, right? Okay, so you think about that. And so, maybe the human heart, anger, we need to learn to control our anger. Yeah, God has perfect anger and justice. Let him take care of that. Verse 23, diverse weights are an abomination to the Lord, and dishonest scales are not good. Again, another verse talking about what? Honesty in business. And so we put this maybe under section 14, under business. And so how many times have we seen diverse weights mentioned? You think about this, and this is something I've thought about more recently as we keep going on, we talk about these things, is Solomon and his son, right, were kings. Were they businessmen? Who oversees the Department of Agriculture, weights and balances in America? We gave it away to the government, right? And so here, when Solomon's writing to his son, he's telling his son, make sure that in your nation, that businessmen are what? Honest, right? Okay. Would this apply to his dealing with other nations? Absolutely. But make sure your nation. And so we think about that. We didn't give the, this was business, wasn't it, for section 14? We put this under. We mentioned that already. Okay. 24 says, a man's steps are the Lord's. How then can a man understand his own way? And so, a man's steps are of who? Why are we here?
God created us.
God created us. Okay. Now, what did Jesus say when his parents came back to get him when he stayed back at the temple?
He's about his father's business.
He's about his father's business, right? So you think about that. And so how then can a man understand whose way? His own way. I think about 2 Peter 1 verse 3. Maybe put pencils this in for this verse. But God's given us what? All things for what? Life and godliness, right? If we want to understand what life is all about, we turn to the Bible. We want to understand what God's purpose for marriage is, what do? Turn to the Bible, right? We want to know how I need to live my life. We turn to the Bible. All these things are, so Section 8, the nature of God. And so we can't fully, our goal is to try to understand the nature of God, but God thinks higher than we do, doesn't he? And so we need to try to ascertain to that. All right, verse 25, it is a snare for a man to devote rashly something as holy, and let me go back, I didn't mark my page. Went too far. Okay. It is a snare for a man to devote rashly something as holy and afterward to reconsider his vow. And so we think about making a promise, right? Devoting something that is to something, a holy purpose. When I thought about this, I thought about Hannah and Samuel, right? Was that a big decision? It was a big decision to devote something. And so, but you step back, it says, a snare for a man to devote rashly something as holy and afterward to reconsider his vow. Can we take it back? Once we make a vow, can we take it back?
We can renege on it.
We can renege. Is that the right thing to do? No, it's not the right thing to do. And so we need to consider carefully what? Our vows, right? So you think about that and that principle. Go on to verse 26. It says, a wise king sifts out the wicked and brings the threshing wheel over them. What's a threshing floor? That's part of the process. So that's the part of the process I always understood. So first part of the process is you bring the grain and you throw it on this hard floor, and then you walk back and forth across it with your oxen, and what they do is the same process as the combine does, and they get the grain, the actual grain, out of the, what would be called the hole, right? They break it out of there. Then when you throw it up in the air, the wind there at the threshing floor would blow it away, okay? And so you think about the principle here is Solomon's telling his son, he said, go and he says, as a king over a nation, you need to stomp out, right? You need to work over your nation in order to remove what from it? Yeah, the chaff, right? Because all that is waste, isn't it? What's it good for? You ever seen anybody collect chaff? No, it's not good for anything. And so you think about that. And so you think about his responsibility over the nation was to do what? Keep out wickedness, to stamp it out. And so, section 27, joy and fulfilled life, or section 29, we think about judgment. As a king, and here in our nation, a lot of times we hear people talk about separation between church and government. Who ordains government? God does. God ordains. Who ordains our leaders? God does. Okay. What's their responsibility? Go to Romans 12 real quick. Go to Romans 12 and notice this in connection with what we're talking about here. Sorry, Romans chapter 13. Okay. Verse 3, it says, for rulers are not a terror to good works, but to what works? Evil. The nation is supposed to do what? Keep people in check. Okay? We were studying the book of Judges tonight. We understand that the people in the book of Judges did that which was right in whose sight? Their own sight. Okay. And when Solomon was given wisdom, then what was what was the first thing we see after him being given wisdom? What does he do? Remember? We talked about it a long time ago. When the two ladies came in, two women came in with their babies. That's right. Was he stamping out evil? Well, I think so. Okay. And so we think about this, maybe section 22. the nation here as a responsibility. Verse 27, the spirit of a man is a lamp of the Lord, searching all the inner depths of his heart. And so our spirit inside of us, what does God look at? The inward man or the outward man? He looks at our hearts, doesn't it? Okay. So when we see the great scene in Revelation, which Eric's getting there, right? That's where he's moving towards. When we're going to stand before God in judgment, what are we going to be judged on? Our actions or deeds. And all those come from what? The heart. Right? Our action and deeds are generated from our heart because what we decide to do. That's what we're going to be judged on. And so maybe section 29, judgment here. Think about that. Verse 28 says, mercy and truth preserve the king, and by loving kindness he upholds his throne. You think about this, and we've talked a lot about kings and leadership. And one of the things I think I mentioned, it's been quite a while back now, because we kind of had a break from this, was what we're seeing is when we talk about a king in the book of Proverbs, every one of these, Jesus was a king, wasn't he? And so he reigned using these principles. He still reigns using these principles, right? And so mercy and truth preserve the king, and by loving kindness he upholds his throne. A lot of times what do we talk about when we talk about God? We talk about grace, mercy, and love. Yeah. Sounds a lot like when you think about love, in our nation we had the hippie movement, right? How much justice was there? Is justice a good thing or a bad thing? You go back to the verse, several verses before, verse 26, a wise king sifts out the wicked. He's got to make judgment, right? We've got to make judgment calls. And for Christians, I think that's something we need to work on, realizing that our responsibility is to know the difference between right or wrong. We can't be hateful or mean about it, but we've got to uphold our standards. And God's calling Solomon's calling his son to uphold God's standards in judgment. So we think about that. Mercy, truth, preserve the king, and by loving kindness he upholds his throne. But these are just some of the attributes that we have mentioned of a king in the book of Proverbs. It says, the glory of young men is their strength, and splendor of old man is their gray head. And so, verse 29, we go back, we talked about this a little bit earlier in Bible class, the idea of how much respect do we have, or how much value do we put on wisdom or a person who possesses or has wisdom? Not enough. So the glory of young men is what? Their strength, right? We're young, we're good looking, we're energetic, all that kind of stuff. But old men have what? Wisdom. And we think about that. And so the splendor of old man is their gray hair. Was it their gray hair we're talking about? Mm-hmm. Paul's out on this. He doesn't have any hair.
Shows they led a life of righteousness.
That's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about, this is figurative speech, talking about a person of wisdom, an aged individual that's experienced. Verse 20 we'll look at here real quick, then we'll drop our peg here. So there's blows that hurt cleanse away evil, and do stripes the inner depths of the heart. So we're talking about chastening, talking about discipline. And what does that do? What does it do? Does there need to be punishment for evil, for wrongdoing? Why else would you do it? Okay, there's lots of different types of fences. The multiflora rose here that we have is now a noxious plant, isn't it? What was the design of that? The fence. It was brought here, and it's called a living hedge, and you plant it in rows, and it's the multiflora rose. And you say, well, it had to be a beautiful fence because it's a rose. It's covered in lots of flowers. Anybody mess with a multiflora rose? They do flower. Not very beautiful, not very long. But what is it that was supposed to keep the cattle in? It's not the flowers. The thorns, right? The chastening, the discipline that fence was going to provide. Today we use barbed wire fences, we use electric fences. You know, I was at Pattonsburg Jail the other day, and the fence is lined with razor wire. Why? We go back and we look at this principle: evil blows that hurt cleanse away what? Evil. We're talking about learning to live our lives with boundaries. And that's what discipline is learning to live with boundaries. Okay? And so, as do stripes the inner depths of the heart. So we're talking about discipline, training, that sort of thing. Any questions or comments?